name is Shanae Walker, and I am the Restorative Practices Lead for Northeast Metro 916. And this is a Restorative Practices introductory training that I do with educators. So welcome. I'm sharing my screen because I do have a PowerPoint, and this is a reminder that I will be joining a later meeting in person so that we'll be able to answer some follow-up questions and have some further dialogue, especially about the worksheet and some of the other practices that I'll be speaking about today. I think that there is a exit kind of ticket that you guys fill out, and in there you can also put questions, and I will get those forwarded to me so that I can come prepared to answer some of those if you have them right away after this training. So with that being said, let's get started. I am going to mute my camera so that the screen shows. I hope that works effectively. If not, we'll see, but we'll get started. All right, restorative practices. With restorative practices, you have to really break down restorative justice and what that is. And restorative justice has been defined in a number of ways. On an abstract level, restorative justice is fundamentally concerned with restoring relationships, with establishing or reestablishing social equality in those relationships. On a more concrete level, restorative justice involves the victim, the offender, and the community in a search for solutions which promote, repair, reconcile, and reassure the community about whatever it is that has occurred. The unifying concept behind restorative justice is restoring the relationship. And so when we look at our school settings, our classrooms, we are in fact a community. And so when there's situations that happen that disrupt the community, restorative justice, restorative practices is the way in which we kind of address those to repair those relationships and continue to build as a community. What is restorative practices? Restorative practices focus on how to improve and repair relationships between people and communities. The purpose is to build healthy communities, increase social capital, decrease crime and antisocial behavior, and repair and restore the relationships. We're in a classroom with each other the majority of the day, most of the week, and so those relationships do in fact matter in how we interact with each other and how we deal when there's conflict. All these things are important. So I really enjoy this video in particular because it does kind of highlight some of the different things that they're doing. You saw one of the teachers had the kids sitting up on the desk, and you saw one of the teachers speaking about some of her kids who were not usually the talkers in the group, but this really does give an opportunity for everyone to have a voice, which is kind of one of my things that brings me really to restorative practices. It's kind of like an equalizer. So normally the people who, you've got the students that are always going to talk and they're always going to answer the questions, but this really does create a space for students who maybe wouldn't normally speak out to have an opportunity to do so. Another thing that they kind of brought out was the conversation about in staff meetings. The best way to get students comfortable with doing the restorative process is for us as adults to get comfortable doing the restorative process. And so I've spent many a day sitting in circle because that really is how we build capacity as adults. We're asking them to be vulnerable. We're asking them to sit in a space. We're asking them to look at each other. We're asking them to be respectful and kind of demonstrate some of those social norms that we are looking for them to have. So for us as adults to model that for them is really important when we're doing this work. So that's why I really wanted to kind of play the fullness of that video. And we will move to our next slide. Where 916 started on our restorative journey. So really, as we began with implementation, we established a restorative team at the site that we were beginning this process at. And the first thing was getting staff trained. We wanted to get as many staff as we could really into the training process of that, because it's a journey and it's a building journey. I continue to do trainings all the time, go to trainings all the time, because that's how we stay sharp and get good at what we're doing. So that was a really important step. And then we started, especially in year one, with staff meetings. We'd start with an opening check-in, restoring talking piece, maybe following that process, or we would do a checkout. And that's really how we began to build capacity amongst staff with this process. And then we moved into the community building circles. And so if you kind of think about the video that we just played, they kind of started those at the beginning of the year, but it doesn't matter when you start them. It's just that when you do start them, that you're consistent with them. And we know that when we start new things, sometimes they go well, sometimes they do not, but it just was about being repetitive with them and continuing and being consistent with the process. Kids, they will get it. I've had some really not good ones at the beginning as we started, but as we continue to do it and as we continue to be open and be flexible about the process and what it looked like, and making sure that we were making accommodations for our students who maybe they didn't want to sit that close. So we would spread out the circle space, or they didn't want to sit on the floor. They wanted to, sit on something else in chairs. So then we tried with chairs. So just being open and being flexible to what it looks like in your classroom and what's going to work best for your students. Some of the restorative activities, the restorative worksheets, I will show you that in a little bit. And that is really a processing tool. There's different variations of it. I've seen lots of them as I've been searching to figure out which one was best for our sites and our students. We did create a sheet that had some visuals because some of our learners have reading deficits and we wanted to make sure that it was equitable. We did create an electronic version also, so if a student is processing on their own and they're capable of doing it without support from an adult. Now that doesn't mean that we don't follow up with a restorative chat and have a conversation about it, but it does give them an opportunity for those who want to process by themselves first to do that. And that's either, like I said, electronically or a written version of that. The restorative chats are really a processing of maybe what they wrote down. So maybe they did it independently and you are processing through them with it. Kind of figuring out what happened, what needs to happen next. Do we need to have more conversation? Do we need to do a circle? Do we need to come up with a plan on how we fix or repair whatever it was that happened? The individual restorative plans really focus on a particular incident. I'll just give an example of a student that was maybe saying some inappropriate sexually related comments in the classroom and having some ongoing conversations with them about that and how do we fix it and what do we need to do so that this doesn't continue to happen. So that's what that looks like. With the circles, we do the community building, we do the SEL circles, and we also do the circles to repair harm. Only people that have been trained to do circles to repair harm should be doing those. Anybody shouldn't just do those, just because we don't want to inflict further harm on the people that are involved by not doing it the way that it's supposed to be done. Re-entry circles following suspension or arrest. Usually when there's a significant incident that would cause such a thing, we would want to do some sort of re-entry meeting, and we try to follow the process of a restorative circle when we do that. And we have to, of course, plan for that. We have to have those individual conversations with everybody that is involved with that. They have to agree to participating in that way also, because we can't just make them do that, but we've offered that as an opportunity and kind of just let families know in the beginning of the school year that this is a part of our restorative work in our district and this is a part of this process, and try to keep them as included in all of that as we can. Okay, so this is the restorative worksheet that we came up with. Myself and one of the English teachers came up with this, and then we wanted to make sure that we had the visuals for our students who needed those prompts as well. Really simple, and it's not, I've gotten some good and I've gotten some bad of these. It's really about us as an adult working with the student to help them process what just happened. Real direct questions. What happened? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What could I do differently next time? What did I learn? And how can I fix it or make it right? So it's giving the student an opportunity to kind of identify who was impacted by their decision that they made, whatever it was that happened. And then what could I do? So helping them identify other options that they had maybe in that moment that they didn't see, but maybe they can see now. And then something that they learned, and how can I fix it or make it right? And that is not always going to mean I need to apologize or something like that. Maybe it's I'll go clean up whatever I destroyed, the property that I damaged, or maybe I'll go talk to that person, depending on what it is. And it's looking different for everybody based on the situation, but this is just kind of a tool to get us started with the processing of whatever it was that happened. The next thing is a restorative chat. And an incident has occurred and a restorative worksheet has been completed. And this is staff's opportunity to determine kind of what's next. Do we need to do something to repair this? Do we need to do a circle? Do we need to have a follow-up conversation with someone? So this is just really a processing conversation to say, hey, this happened. How do we move forward? Circles, classroom rituals. So some of the teachers do their morning meetings in circle. Not every classroom does morning meetings, so that may not be applicable to you. The weekly check-ins and check-outs. So for some of the teachers, the Monday after a weekend, we come in and we will do a check-in. How was the weekend? Maybe we have another question that's involved in there, so we can have a couple of go-rounds with that. And we also use that as the classroom discussion. So if there's announcements, if there's something that's big happening this week, or there's something that they need to know about, or something that needs to get turned in, or whatever the case is, but this is an opportunity for them to sit in circle, to practice the process, to get comfortable in the process, and us have ongoing conversations with them in kind of that format. The community building activities. Those are, again, similar to kind of the check-ins, but maybe it's just about a specific question. We're doing topics of the day. We are doing current events. Just an opportunity to sit in the space and to practice this process. The social skills, SEL lessons, we've got several of them. I will do an example and show that in a minute about some of the SEL lessons that we've done in Circle. Even if it's a presentation format, there's an opportunity at the end to process what they learned in the Circle format. Just another example of how some of the teachers that I've been working with in the district have utilized these circles. So they had an opportunity to sit in circle every day, whether it's the end of the day, whether it's the beginning of the day. Again, the Motivational Mondays, checking about the weekend, do some goal setting, classroom announcements, maybe even just schedule for the day. Talk It Out Tuesdays, current affairs discussions. Maybe that's for some of the older students, but just figuring out a creative way to have conversation about just what's going on in the world. Writing Prompt Wednesday. This is a prompt that you give out, and then students are able to write about it, and then you ask them to share out with the talking piece in the circle. And I ask staff to also participate in that. So if there's EAs in the classroom, I ask them to write as well so that they can all share out and model what those expectations look like. Thoughtful Thursdays is something new you would like to try, and the steps to make it happen. So a little bit of goal setting, it's a little bit of planning, and the kids seem to enjoy that one. Checkout Fridays, high and low of the week. Did you reach your goal that you set for yourself earlier in the week? And then start thinking about next week and something that you need to do. So it's about organizing, it's about planning, it's about goal setting, it's about did we meet those goals? So those are more complex, and you want to make sure and wait till your class is used to the format and comfortable with doing that before popping into these. But once you get this established in your classroom and you start utilizing the circles in this way, it is an easy switch to this. I'm just going to show an example of the community building circles. And this is one that I do as I am starting with a group that is just beginning kind of the restorative process. This was a fun one, and I know it's really pretty much show and tell, but it was interesting, and it's been interesting to see even our high school students kind of enjoy this piece of the community building circle. So we had them let them know that they can bring an item in, share the item, and we've even done this virtually since we've been in distance learning. Of course, we give the message that it needs to be school appropriate, and if there are students that were concerned that may not do that, we may ask them prior to our community circle what it is that they are bringing. But we do the welcome. We ask them to kind of calm their bodies, put their feet down, take some deep breaths, and I usually will lead either some calm breathing or just have a calm moment where no one's talking, just to get everybody grounded in the activity that we're about to do. Opening up the circle and talking about the talking piece, what it stands for and why it's important. I think another way that we did this was ask students to work on their own talking pieces. And I've seen teachers let students, whatever, however they choose that. But if it's my week, we get to use my talking piece and then rotate that way so that every student had an opportunity to have their talking piece that they chose be the talking piece. I don't know how that will look now with COVID and not being able to pass anything, but that is just another way that we did that there. The next part is our common agreements for the circle. So whatever norms you establish in your classroom, and we can talk a little bit about that too when I am in person, they should be repeated. And usually I put them up visually somewhere. And so if I'm in the classroom, I may put them on the smartboard. I may put them in the center of the circle on the ground if we are sitting in circle, just as a visual reminder for folks that this is the commitments that we made to each other. I do review them every time just because we need those sometimes. And for us, speak from the heart, respect the talking piece, listen to understand, and take the time you need, knowing others need time as well, and then honoring confidentiality. It has been different in the distance learning model, but our reminders are very similar. I think the most notable changes are we ask that people participating do mute their mics when they're not speaking. We ask them to use the raise your hand feature, and then we remind them that there is an order, and so we will always offer an opportunity to come back around and let them get a chance to say what they need to say. Usually for the storytelling round, have them say their name and a highlight of something. So depending on what your topic is or what you're doing, you can decide what that first part looks like. And then the second round would be describing the item that they brought and why it's important. And after that, because people are going to have questions about items that other people brought, I allow another time to go around and have them ask a question or say something positive about someone else's item. The third round, in one word, what it's like to bring something personal to share. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that piece. A lot of people are nervous about sharing their personal things. So we want to acknowledge that in that space. And so we do ask that question. People can always pass if they choose to do so. And then in the closing, we remind them that, what we're doing is going to be something that's ongoing as far as being in circle and being a part of this process, and reminding them that this is a community, our classroom, and we pass it around and pass the talking piece around at that point and ask them what their thoughts are about that. And then we thank them after every circle for participating in the circle. That's really important because we do appreciate they don't have to do it. And if they make the choice to do so, we want to always thank them for being a part of that. Okay. So our social skills. We did a lot of conversations, especially as we were moving into distance learning, about online safety and our reminders, because even the smaller kiddos are putting themselves in these little dangerous situations with some of their online activities. So what we did was focus really on some safety questions, how do you know who people are, who they say they are online, how do you decide who you accept as friends, what information should you keep private online, and each round is an opportunity for you to pass the talking piece around or let each student go around. and answer those questions. And then following those questions, kind of saying what it is and saying what the concerns are and bringing those up as a group, then we talk about how we stay safe. And those are the final three questions of that circle. And then we, as a class, did the Safe Kids quiz, and it's an online quiz, it's interactive. You can have them doing it individually or as a group. We usually do it as a group just so everybody can kind of hopefully be on the same page once we follow the guidelines that we set for ourselves. So that's just another example of using the circles as part of a SEL type situation. The teaching circles, another example. This one I did with our lead social worker for 916, Cara McGlynn. And so about being assertive, we go through this lesson and just really describe what our learning targets are. And then we move into each piece of that. And then why is it important? And then there's a discussion opportunity. And for that, there's a video also. We circle up and we sit in circle and let them practice kind of what we talked about in the circle. So it's always an opportunity for us to, if we want to just do a lesson, to have the follow-up part of that to be to sit in circle. The circles to repair harm. And for this one, again, I think I said earlier that you don't want to do these unless you're trained to do circles to repair harm. We can cause more damage than helping if we don't do it the way that it should be done. Making sure that we have talked to every person that is involved, making sure that we have supports. Sometimes students will ask for their person to be a part of those circles to support them, identifying what our goals are for this circle. So these are real, these are important ones, and they're actually pretty serious. So we want to make sure that we do those well. And so this is not the first response to a situations that happen. There's all those steps before you would get to that and make the decision that you would do a circle to repair harm. And just going back to that really quickly too, it can take time to build up to a restorative circle to repair harm. So there's a lot of coaching and help to prepare students for the situations. And, for example, I've role played with a student prior to participating in a circle repair harm and said, like, this is how this may go. They may respond this way. So just creating as many opportunities as you can prior to that, leading up to that, to make sure that everybody feels comfortable participating in the circle to repair harm. The reentry circles, I spoke a little bit about that earlier, but following a significant event such as a suspension or arrest, we've had situations where it was something that was very disruptive to the learning community, and we wanted to have a conversation with the student and the family, of course, and then at other times when there was harm to another student, we would invite another student in that conversation, not with the parent, of course, but with the other student that was involved. So it's really important that before we just, a kid suspended, something big happened, and then we just have them go back to class, to have a conversation. And again, this is something that we build up to. So a child may be suspended and come back, and then we have a conversation with the student and their family. But then we do need to have some follow-up conversations about other people that were impacted by the behaviors, and then how do we fix it, and what do we do moving forward. So this is a really, I like these a lot. I think it's important. Sometimes when there's something big that happens in your classroom, as staff were affected by that as well. And so this is really an opportunity to be vulnerable a little bit and say, this is how I, as a teacher, was impacted by what happened. So I really do enjoy these, and I think it's really, really valuable when we're talking about restoring and repairing trust that's lost or broken as we're trying to build the community in our classroom. So normally, if I was in person, we would circle up and talk about our common agreements. So I will talk about our common agreements, and I will show them again next time. But I think we talked about this a little bit earlier as I was describing the circle format. But for us, our common agreements are confidentiality. What is said in our circle stays in the circle. Listen to understand. You may disagree with someone, but don't shut your brain down. You might learn something new. Respect the talking piece. You may pass. And are there any other agreements that you think that we need to add? So an example of that is this summer during ESY, I had a student who wanted to play loud rock music whenever his mic was on. And a couple of the kids were able to say, you know, when you do that, I get really distracted. Could you not play the music when it's your turn? And we were able to make that agreement as a group. So it's really important in an effort to kind of get buy-in from the students to ask for their input on that. And maybe when you're establishing your classroom common agreements or norms, you set that up. But I always offer that question because sometimes there's things that are happening, there's other dynamics that are happening, and we want to not miss that piece because we want this to be a positive experience for them. And if we can create and add agreements to each other for the space, then that does help it go smoothly. And it gets them invested in it when they know that they've been a part of setting up kind of the norms and they follow them. So I found that to be a really, really helpful piece when establishing that in our classroom. So there's our Let's Circle Up. We will do that when I am live. We will split in small groups. We will ask some questions. We will have some conversations. And I think you'll enjoy it. I think for me, the most important part of the circle and how you learn and how you do it is by sitting in circle. So I'm excited to join you all later, and we will have this conversation. But bye for now.